Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make normal-sized nerdy things, and last week I made a knife. This week, however, I'm gonna make a gun named Kenny.
Pew, pew, pew.
Right off the bat, to help give Kenny some rigidity and to keep both the weight and cost down, I'm gonna build myself a little aluminium armature that I can just slap the clay on top of. Once I've got roughly the right size for the body, I can bend the back end down into a grip, which I can then elongate until it's just about the correct thickness. Then I'll do the exact same thing for the middle of the gun in order to keep it somewhat balanced, and I'm ready to apply a thin layer of clay over the entire surface. Now, because I plan on walking around my house shooting and stabbing everything I see, I don't want the body to have any obvious mounting points or holes, which means it's a bit of a pain to sculpt without smooshing all the detail. Fortunately, being a horrifying living gun with a face, Kenny has a lot of droopy overlapping parts, which means I should be able to break him down into sections to sculpt and bake. This way I'll always have a hard surface to hold on to while I work on the subsequent sections. Now with that being said, I'm gonna start at the end, and by that I mean I'm gonna start by making Kenny's butthole, his barrel. Basically, I wanted to talk over this portion since I don't know how to describe it without getting demonetized. Fortunately, this part's done though, and I can move on to the more ad-friendly portion of the build. To make the pistol grip, I'll grip the pistol, then add the sections of clay between my fingers to ensure that it fits my hand perfectly. Then I can smooth the joints between the sections of clay before getting to work adding the detail. I'll start with the vein that runs down the center of the handle, smoothing and blending it out so it joins neatly with the rest of the clay before getting to work adding what I'm going to call Kenny's six-pack pistol grip abs. These will get blended together and smoothed into the rest of the grip, and I'll add some little blobs of clay here and there to help build up the back side of the grip so that it fits a bit better in hand. Then it's just a case of sticking a set of 6 teeny tiny blobs of clay onto the inside portion of the grip, then smoothing them into points. These are of course the nipples that come standard on any commercially available sidearm. Now I don't know much about guns, but I'm fairly confident that these are anatomically correct. Finally, before Kenny goes into the oven for his first bake, I'll give the surface some nice skin-like texture by first swiping everything with a sharp silicone shaper. Then I'll crack out a pair of blue nitrile gloves, which have these perfect little grippy textures on the tip. With the gloves on, all I need to do is gently poke and prod the whole surface and that texture will transfer into the clay, then it's into the oven to bake and I can get started on the underbarrel. I'll start by sticking an oversized lump of clay onto the bottom of Kenny's pistol belly before roughly blending it in to give it some shape, and then I can cut away the excess until I've got the correct size. Otherwise, with the general shape sorted out, I can start to add the finer details. A spiky dealie will complete the trigger, and a series of wormy dealies will complete the various pipes and tubey bits that make up the majority of Kenny's underside. Mostly it's just a case of adding blobs and digging troughs until it looks appropriately gnarly. I find the trick to making organic looking monstrosities is to keep the sharp edges to a minimum. So once I've built up enough detail, I'll come back and blend all the harsh edges together with a ball stylus and some silicone shapers, followed by a heavy once over with isopropyl alcohol. Then, same as I did for the grip and the tip, I'll hit it with a 1-2 combo of swipes and pokes to give the whole thing a bit more of a skin-like texture. Then it's into the oven again before moving on to the final section. Kenny's top side is both the largest and most detailed section, and it's also the part of the sculpt that'll get the most attention for obvious reasons. I also wasn't really sure how to get the proportions and shape right, so I just did what I always do, start slapping clay onto the model and hope that I somehow fail my way upwards to success. Eventually I reached a point where adding clay wasn't working, so I started the next step of the process, which is taking clay away until it looks kinda almost sorta correct. Thankfully at this point it was starting to come together, so some wormy dealies wrapped up and over the top with one side blended in gave me a set of flappy skin plates. All that's left to do then is refine the shape, smooth them out a little bit more so they look a little more natural, then I can cut them down to their final form. Despite the already oven-cured sections, Kenny's kinda hard to hold, so I'll give him a bamboo skewer enema, then mount that into a sculpting block. This will make it easier to add some of the finer details on the side without messing up the overall shape. With the majority of the detail and texture added to the body and with all the sharp edges smoothed out, I can finally get to work on his face. I've pre-baked a couple big round eyeballs that I'll press into place, then I can bulk out the mouth with an extra thick wormy dealy. I'll pull Kenny off his butt-mounted bamboo support, then sketch out his wide smile with my scalpel, refine the shape with my sculpting tool, then hollow out the inside with some carving tools. A couple strategically placed blobs around the edge of his mouth will help to widen his grin and give him some big cheeky cheek wrinkles. Then once I've smoothed it all out, I can start to add his big rounded teeth. I made these off camera by rolling a ball of clay, squishing it slightly flat, then cutting it in half and baking it so I can aggressively press it into place in the soft, uncured clay of Kenny's gums. To give his eyes a bit more character, I'll squish a flat worm of clay onto the upper portion of each ball, then press it nice and flat to give him a couple happy and expressive eyelids. Then a long wormy dealy wrapped around the outside will be his puffy eye sockets. To spruce up the space between his head and his kite and his back plates, I'll slap a couple more worms of clay in place, then smooth and blend them together until they're nice and wrinkly. Finally, a final once over with the silicone shapers will smooth all the rough edges out and blend it all together so it looks like a single slab of sentient pistol meat. Now on the unseen side of Kenny's head, he's got a thing. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like a calamari ring with a little other thing inside of it. Otherwise, I'll poke a couple holes for future antennae before giving the entire body a final once over with isopropyl alcohol, followed by the old silicone shaper swipey and a blue glove pokey. Those aforementioned antennae are just a couple of wires wrapped in clay and flattened at the tips, which can then be pressed into place in their predetermined spots. Otherwise, that's the sculpting finished, so Kenny is ready for his final bake before moving on to the painting. Now Kenny's got a whole lot of bright colors that blend together, so rather than tax my already underdeveloped painting skills, once I've primed his entire body white, I'll do the vast majority of the coloring with my airbrush. I'll start by painting the first few plates with a fiery orange base coat to give me my initial coloring, before coming back with a darker pink to add a bit of variation and a more original design accurate coloring. I'll follow the orange and pink with some magenta, which I'll work into the orange and gently blend from the middle plate up towards the center of Kenny's head. I like to test the colors directly on the model rather than on a separate sheet, since I find that trusting my gut and hoping for the best gets me pretty accurate results almost half the time every single time.
That doesn't make sense.
Otherwise, the grip, his whole face, and a good portion of the top of Kenny's head gets a nice light blue, which I'll then follow with a darker purple that gets sprayed more strategically in and around the wrinkles and folds, then as the main color on top to cross the bridge between the blue and the magenta. I tried making the darker purple dots using my airbrush, but laziness kept me from the 5 seconds it takes to reduce the pressure on my compressor, so my dots weren't nearly as sharp around the edges as I would have liked. The Underbarrel gets a terracotta base coat followed by a darker purple wash to help highlight some of the wrinkles and recesses. Then I'll come back with my paintbrush in a brighter purple to help clean up those purpley bits on top. To add some light white speckles, I turn the pressure way down on the airbrush and flick the trigger, which tosses little blobs of paint onto my model. And to create the glowy yellow bits on the sides of the gun, I'll lay down a nice white base coat in the indents, followed by about a dozen coats of fluorescent green and yellow. Finally, I'll repaint the eyes and teeth with a simple white base coat, then give the teeth a once over with a very thin sepia wash to help dirty them up. To make the perfectly round black pupils of the eyes, I've dipped one of my clay circle cutters in black paint, which I can then stab into place on the freshly painted eyeball. The acrylic paint is a little too flat looking, so I'll spray the entire gun in a layer of satin varnish, which should both protect the paint and give it a bit of gloss without making it too shiny. All that's left to do then is add a bit of UV resin into each of the glowy green bits on the sides, then I can give each of my big beautiful eyeballs a layer of their own shiny resin. One final test run to make sure the grip is good, and we are all done here and onto the Glamour Shots.
Pew, 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 pew. Yeah. Pistol whip, pistol whip. Yeah.
As always, a massive thank you to my patrons who continue to support the creation of fleshy, full-faced weaponry, and a very special shout out to my newest patrons, Jared Fleet, Warren Springer, Courtney Boucher, Andre Pastor, DB, Wonder Steven, Fightman X, Hannah, Christine Janvrin, Rob Skabab, Super Powerful Dragon Death Ninja from Outer Space, Caleb Pineapple, James Rudder, Chris H, Nylon, Joshua Switz, Katrina, Bit Die, Swindler on the Roof, Gavin M, Fizzgig, Samantha Lewis, Amara Rose Hearth, Salty Cupcake, Birdie, Watermelon Break, Adam, Corley Katz, Sabrina Nelson, and Hee Hee PP. I hope you like this one because I think it's pretty neat. Also, given what the last few years have brought, it feels oddly appropriate to make a knife and a gun going into 2023. I don't know what the new year brings, but at least now I know I'm prepared. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.